All right. Hello, everyone. It's great to have so many of you joining us from across the U.S. My name is Shytance Wren, and I'm a policy analyst for Education Commission of the States. I want to thank you for attending our webinar on strengthening post-secondary and workforce data alignment. We have a great discussion in store for you with the ECS team and also our partner, the Strada Education Foundation. Please note that we are recording the webinar today to allow you to revisit the content as well as share with your colleagues. And if you're joining us for the first time, Partnering for Success is designed to provide you, our commissioners and policymakers, with opportunities for connection with peers, researchers, innovators, and others who are providing solutions to some of today's most pressing education policy issues. We intend for you to leave these webinars filled with insight, inspiration, and also resources that will support you as you address similar challenges in your state. On behalf of the ECS team, I'd like to thank our partners who help make events like this one possible. Thank you for your continued partnership, your support that continues to allow us to convene the people behind the policy. I'm pleased to be joining forces again with the Strada Education Foundation for today's important conversation on strengthening post-secondary and workforce data alignment. Specifically, we're focusing on the Postsecondary Employment Outcomes Coalition, also referred to as the PSEO Coalition, which is a network of institutions, university systems, and state agencies that are partnering with the U.S. Census Bureau to link post-secondary graduate data with employment and earnings outcomes. And we have a wonderful panel today of state leaders and data experts to discuss ways to improve how education and employment outcomes are tracked, shared, and used to inform better policy. And this is the second webinar in our three-part post-secondary series presented in partnership with Strada, who has long been a national leader in strengthening education to employment pathways. And also this discussion is accompanied by a blog entitled Linking Post-Secondary and Workforce Outcomes Data Nationally, which highlights more member states of the PSEO Coalition that are working with the US Census to link post-secondary and workforce data. I encourage you to check it out. There should be a link in the chat for you to review. And as we move through the session today, we want to hear from you as well. So as you follow along, please be sure to place any of your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will have a time at the end for your questions from the audience. Now I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Strada's Vice President for State Data System Advancement, Dana Brandt, who will guide us through the discussion. Dana leads engagement with state data systems to drive enhancements in state and federal data infrastructure. She joined Strada in August 2024 after serving as the executive director of the Rhode Island Longitudinal Data System. In this role, she championed the state data systems establishment and statute and developed the critical legal and governance structures for its operation. She also led Rhode Island's participation in multi-state data sharing collaboratives and chaired the executive council of the Eastern States Longitudinal Data Collaborative. Welcome, Dana. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Shytance, for that warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here today and moderating this panel on the PSEO Coalition. The coalition is a close partner of ours at Strada. They are anchoring technical assistance that we are providing out to state education to employment data systems. And I am going to turn it over just shortly to Gina Johnson, the director of the PSEO Coalition, and Rachel Boon, who serves as the vice chair on the coalition's board, so you can hear more about what that looks like. But first, I want to tell you a little bit more about who you're hearing from. So Gina Johnson is a principal and co-founder of Data Empowered Consulting, where she focuses on improving knowledge management and data-informed decision-making in post-secondary education through coaching and co-designing frameworks that empower organizational leaders to reimagine their data and analytics efforts and enhance their knowledge management capacities at scale. In this role, Gina collaborates with many partners, including serving as the director of the PSEO Coalition. As director, Gina collaborates with the PSEO Coalition board to shape and implement the strategic direction of the coalition, including engaging its members and developing resources to facilitate the use of data. Gina has over 25 years of experience in the field of education. Before focusing on consulting, she served as the senior associate at NCHEMS, was the assistant executive director for partnerships and membership at the Association for Institutional Research, held various roles in institutional research, teaching, and policy analysis in post-secondary education, and served as a K-12 special education teacher in her early career. And Rachel is the Chief Academic Officer with the Iowa Board of Regents and the PSEO Coalition's board's vice chair. She joined the Board of Regents in October 2016, and she previously worked at the Academic Affairs Division at Ivy Tech Community College, and prior to that held roles at the Higher Education Data Sharing Consortium, Drake University, Indiana University, Bloomington, and Waukee Community Schools. Her experience is in higher education, policy, and institutional research, program evaluation, and accreditation. She is taught at the high school and college level. Gina, with that, I'm going to pass it over to you to share more details about what the coalition is, who it engages, and how states can get involved.
Thanks so much, Dana. Such a pleasure to be presenting with Dana and with Rachel. And you'll smile, or hopefully you smiled when you see that, or when you heard that Rachel and I both have experience in both K-12 and post-secondary, because this is one of the features, obviously, of what we're going to talk about today, is really the idea that we can map data and we can follow learners through their whole life cycle. So I'm going to start with just an introduction to the post-secondary employment outcomes. And we love to start with this map. It makes us very happy to share this map. And actually, I have to update this map very frequently, which makes us even happier, because that means we're having more and more folks engaging with us in the PSEO Coalition and sharing their data as part of the PSEO. So very briefly, the post-secondary employment outcomes, the project itself, started about 7-8 years ago when David Troutman from the University of Texas system at the time started working with a team of people on creating a way for learners in Texas at the University of Texas system to figure out what it was like, or what it might be like for them when they graduated and went into careers. And so they had wonderful data in the state of Texas to show folks what the average earnings were and all kinds of other information. But what they realized very quickly is that they didn't have anything for people who moved out of state, or maybe they came from another state to attend a University of Texas system or a University of Texas institution and then headed back to that state in order to get a job. And they didn't have any data on those folks. So David started nudging folks at the census saying, hey, is there any way we could partner on this and get some data to help us expand and better understand the outcomes of our students, no matter where they go in the United States after they graduate from a University of Texas institution. And so Andrew Foote and his colleagues at Census, who are very good friends of ours, finally kind of said, yeah, maybe we'll test this out. And they created, and they worked very, very hard to create this process and this whole system called the PSEO. And in that system, basically, what happens is institutions, most often systems or state agencies like the State Longitudinal Data System or the Department of Higher Education or a commission in a state, share data on behalf of those institutions with the US Census about the graduates. Pretty simple data files, actually. And then Census matches those with workforce data. And we have, I'll talk about in a moment, all the pieces that we have in there. But just to let you know, with this map, we have been expanding, and we grew from Texas, the University of Texas system actually within Texas. And now we've grown and grown. Pretty soon Colorado was interested. Michigan was interested, and now we have over 35 states, plus Washington, D.C. and Western Governors University. And we have more than 1,000 institutions represented in this data set. And so we have fantastic coverage. We have a bunch of states that are currently exploring in conversation with us about joining this cool project. And we're very excited to engage with them, and maybe some of you on this webinar are some of those states. So it's really fun to see this map. You can see what the coverage is, and you can see we have all those in yellow are recently joined. And actually, I need to update the map again because BYU Idaho just signed a few days ago, and so we will be able to highlight Idaho as well. So we're very excited about that. So if you're wondering what kind of data you can get from the PSEO, basically, what we have in there are earnings, which is very exciting, and it's the thing that folks think about most often at the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile annual earnings for college and university graduates. And we have this 1, 5, and 10 years after graduation, which is fantastic. We also have what I think are kind of the unsung heroes of this data set are the employment flows. And this is where we can see where folks went after they graduated, into what industry sector, and into what's called here census division. In other words, where they went. So did they stay in the state? Did they move to another area of the country? And it's by census division, so the Midwest, the South, and other parts of it. We have statistics available by institution, so you can actually go in and look at, in my case, graduate of the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. You can click in there, you can look at that specific institution, pick a degree level, and you can look at within a cohort, in order to protect data and be able to do wonderful things with these data and learn from them. You can pick that, you can pick field of degree, and then, like I said, it's 1, 5, and 10 years post-graduation. So it's a really fantastic data set. It helps us expand your ability as a state, as an institution, as a system, to understand the outcomes of your graduates beyond just those, again, who remain in state, because you might have those data already. These really expand it to folks external. And so I'm going to show a couple of examples then of what you would see if you go to the PSEO Explorer. This is created by the US Census. It is an official US Census website. And so you can see how you essentially click in there. There's all kinds of things, and we have webinars coming up this summer to teach you how to use this. But essentially, I wanted to show you just a few screenshots. This one is the earnings, and so you can pick a degree program. You can pick to compare it to another degree program or all programs within that institution. You can also pick state. You can pick, as we said before, all of the institutions within the state or a specific institution within that state. And you can, on the left-hand side, you can see all of the different filters you can filter this information by. But this gives you an example of 1, 5, and 10 years of earnings. And then the next screenshot that I have shows you a little bit about one of the first pieces, which is the flow, the industry flow. And this just gives you one example. I left it in this case on other instructional programs, which is all the instructional programs available, in this case in Colorado, at all of the institutions there. And then I just compared it in this case to engineering, just to show what's possible. And you can see where the flow heads into the types of industries that folks are going into. And then finally, our last screenshot shows us the other kind of flow, which is geographic flow. And so this helps you look at where graduates are going. In this case, I changed it to education because I was looking at that on another day and digging in and figuring out, I wonder where our teachers are going. And I wonder where folks who are majoring in education as compared to other instructional programs, and whether they're staying, in this case, in the state of Colorado, or moving to some of the other census regions. One other thing you can do, which I did not take a screenshot of, but you can play around with it when you go to the PSEO Explorer tool, is you can actually show these data by industry and by geography. So you can really get kind of complex in some of the visualizations that you can play around with in this tool. So that gives you an idea of what sort of things you can see. And then just want to let you know about the coalition. As Dana said, we are a really great group of people who are thinking about really interesting things. And I feel very fortunate to be able to work with this group. So the coalition is, in a sense, separate from the project because the coalition isn't run by Census. Census is our partner in creating the data, sharing the data, creating a way for people to publicly grab the data, pull down the data, use the data tool. That's their job. Census's job is to provide the data. for the public and make it useful for them. The coalition is just that. It's the perfect term for it. It's essentially the folks that participate in data sharing, whether they have an MOU direct with Census and then share those data, or whether they're an institution whose data are part of the system. The coalition is the groups of entities, state agencies, excuse me, both post-secondary and workforce, systems, institutions. And then also, because we're very welcoming, we want to also include folks who are interested in this, but maybe aren't sharing data yet. And so ways that we can all be conversing about these topics, because we're all very excited to use these data. So at this point in time, we have 35 plus, as I shared, participating states, over 1,000 institutions represented in the data, and more states represented in our coalition, because we are partnering, as I said, with institutions and systems and states that are interested and aren't yet sharing data with the US Census. Then finally, I just want to share some resources, and our partners at ECS were so kind to say that they're going to also put all these in the chat so that you can see what these links are, since some of them are a little bit longer, and then you can just click on them. But I just want to share some resources. You can always go to our website, pseocoalition.org. Lots of information about us, about what we're doing. We would love to engage with you there. And then we have specifically on that website a resource library. We have some reports, some toolkits that help you learn more about the data. And then we also have some resources of reports that folks have written using the data, because we want to create a community of data users. And then the PSEO Explorer, which is what I was showing with the screenshots, that is a marvelous, fantastic tool that the Census has created and updates. I recommend you spend an hour or two just clicking around in there and see what you can find. And then finally, if you want to actually download all of the data, it's not individual data, of course, it's very safely shared data, and it's data that's within those cohorts, but you can download the entire data sets as well on the Census website. So I'm going to turn it over now to Rachel, because she's going to, as our vice chair of our board, going to talk a bit more about her perspective in Iowa.
Thank you, Gina. And I want to just offer my thanks. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks to Dana and Gina and all the ECS staff on pulling this together. I appreciate being a part of this all. I want to start with a little bit of quick background. The Iowa Board of Regents represents the 3 public universities in our state, and the board became engaged in PSEO, and by extension then ultimately this coalition, in about 2021. But the truth is that only happened after I spent probably 2.5 years sort of chasing down David Troutman and Andrew Foote from Census, trying to figure out how to get involved, because I had seen David present on this, I think in 2017, and immediately knew I needed to get involved. So I was rather impatient, but yet also persistent about it, and was able to get involved. I will say, and there's been some sort of suggestion there are states that are in waiting and they're working on signing it. The wait, I do want to emphasize, is a lot shorter now than it used to be. Processes are getting smoother as more and more are involved. So the years-long process I described to you is not actually a current description of how this works. However, I will add, I was very pleased after we became involved, and we were immediately happy with sort of the access to information we were getting from this. In 2022, then we were able to use sort of the obvious value of it to convince our community college colleagues in Iowa to join the effort. So we now have all 15 community colleges are part of this through they're coordinated through the Iowa Department of Education. So they are excellent partners in this as well. And I'm also very optimistic that by this time next year, I will have about maybe a dozen of our Iowa private college colleagues joining as well. So if it's not already obvious, I'll say I'm sort of an evangelist for this work. I really believe in telling the story of sort of how education can empower people and provide these pathways, and this is such a great tool to do that. I also am willing to acknowledge that describing myself as an evangelist for this and for the coalition may sound a little trite or strange to some, but it really fits how I conceptualize it, because for me, I want this work to impact people and their trajectories. I want every college in the country to be part of this so that nobody is excluded from the power of what it can do for a system or an institution or an individual who's looking at it. One way you might see this is through a data visualization that Census put together. I think we're going to pop it up on the screen here. That shows the growth of the institutional participation in this work over the last several years. Every circle that pops up is a new institution joining. Often they join in clusters because an entire state commission for higher ed might join, or a Department of Education, or a university system office. So watching this growth and this visualization gives, I know Gina and I, certainly a lot of joy in watching that. It's been a really wonderful way to sort of see this organic growth that's been going on. And ultimately, I want to use this, and we'll get hopefully through Q&A into a little more detail on this, but I'll just say at a high level, my objective in Iowa has been to use this information to help impact policymakers, to help impact students and families and the faculty and institutional leaders. And at this point, I do sometimes feel a little bit like I'm preaching about it as an evangelist would, but I'm kind of embracing that role because I don't think we've yet truly realized the full potential of how we can use this to improve trajectories. And helping our collective post-secondary community do that and get to that level where we're maybe having that sort of actualization is really motivating for me. So that was brief. I thank you. I want to turn it back over to Dana, I think, now for the next portion of our time, and we can sort of take some questions and take it from there.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Gina, for that introduction to the Census Bureau's PSEO project and the PSEO Coalition. I have a few questions for you, and I see that there are some already coming through the chat, but I'm going to echo Shytance's reminder. If you do have any questions for us, please pop them in the chat. We will try our best to answer them in the remaining time we have together. So, Gina, to kick things off, what approaches have states used to build internal capacity to analyze and apply PSEO data effectively?
Thanks, Dana. That's a great question. And one of the things we're finding, and I don't have to tell anyone on this webinar this information, but everyone feels short-staffed, right? Especially during legislative session. Rachel knows this way better than I do. And so I can't say anyone is able to go, oh, hey, we signed up for the PSEO, and so we can hire 3 more people to help us analyze the data. That's just not realistic. But what we can do and what we're finding is really helpful is being a part of the coalition, because it doesn't necessarily expand the number of staff you have at your disposal on your team, but what it does do is enhance the work that we're all doing. And so if I can speak for our members, they view the PSEO and the PSEO data as one tool in their toolbox, thinking about education to workforce. It's not the only one. They have all kinds of data that they have access to. They have all kinds of ways that they're thinking about it uniquely in their setting. But what we offer and what we have as this coalition is really, we have a network of professionals. We meet very regularly. We also offer resources, and thanks to Strada and Gates Foundation and some other partners that are very supportive of this work, we have some resources that's allowing us to create some tools, data visualizations. We're having some conversation about how we can use these data to speak about policy aspects as well, or use these data to share either directly with students or with intermediaries that speak to students. And we're able as a coalition to create some of these resources. And then our members, the states, the systems, the institutions, can localize these resources, make them tailored to their site, so that they don't all have to reinvent these things. We can do it collectively, and then folks can make it meaningful for their site. So we don't, unfortunately, because I'm a person with a background in IR, I would love to hire a whole bunch more people. But what we can do is divide and accomplish, is what we like to call it, and then our members can tailor it to their settings.
So Rachel, actually building on that comment from Gina, can you share how any in-state tools, dashboards or other reports have complemented PSEO's national comparisons, and how you might be layering in that information to inform decision making at both the state and institutional level?
Sure. So while the data visualizations Gina shared with you that are part of the Census LEHD website, the PSEO, and I believe the link was dropped in the chat for you. That's really helpful, and it's a great way for us to sort of play around when we want to sort of show people what's going on. What's been really powerful though is we've downloaded the data, and we download the data each time it gets refreshed, so that we have any new institutions, any refreshed data that the Census Bureau has put into it, any adjustments they've made, and we have created some of our own interactive dashboards that are both at the system level and at the institution level. And what that has allowed us to do is, one, we can do it in our school colors and different things like that. But more importantly, we've been able to integrate it with other data that we think helps round out the story. And so certainly earnings matter a lot. It's part of the outcome, but some of it has to do, of course, in our state, as I'm sure is true in most states. People want to know, well, how many of them are working in Iowa, right? Well, we can use the PSEO to tell us that by industry and by field of study. That's powerful. We couldn't do that before. We also have included in there, embedded into our dashboard, the rate by program, the rate at which they're enrolling in graduate, for bachelor's degrees, the rate at which they enroll in graduate programs. That's not PSEO data. That's something we get from Student Clearinghouse. But by integrating PSEO data with other information, debt information, which we pull from College Scorecard, different things, we have created something that's really useful for our department chairs, that's really useful for our career services and advising staff to use when they're working with students. And we use it a lot to respond to legislative requests. And so if we have a legislative committee or an individual legislator or the governor's office who is seeking information about some of our programs, this is a way we can push that out. And because we've created our own dashboards like this, we can often push out really quickly.
That layering is really powerful. Pull from some of these national efforts and then complement it with your own state structures. Can you also share, Rachel, a little on what structures you have in Iowa, any advisory boards or interagency compacts that have made your PSEO efforts more resilient over time?
We're a very decentralized state in terms of from a post-secondary standpoint. So our colleagues at the Department of Ed that sort of handle the community college side of it are folks that we're not sort of under the same authority in any way, but we partner with them on so many things. So we're probably talking to them once a week about a host of things. So this naturally just became a part of those conversations. Similarly, with our private college colleagues, so we don't yet have a sort of a structural piece in place for that. But as we start adding them, that's something we really want to look at. To be honest, the most structural thing that impacts the stability of the work for us at this point is because of the early years when we started using this data and putting it in front of legislators. They liked it so much, they decided to mandate it in law. So we are now statutorily obligated to do some of the reporting that we're doing using this data. And that statute also obligates us to put it in front of students and do all sorts of things like that. So structurally, that's actually really important. And it was something that it was a bill I supported because I knew it would help us ensure some additional buy-in on our campuses with any lagging people who were not quite so sure that this was a great thing. And so, yeah, I think every time we add partners, either from the community colleges or private colleges, it is also part of what makes it structurally sound, because the more, and from other states, frankly, where our peer institutions are located, because it gives us the power of being able to do those cross-institutional comparisons. And when people are in it, you know, you want to be able to look at how your peers are doing. So that having more and more and more makes it harder to leave. It's like a Hotel California of data, except you don't want to go.
So Gina, speaking of a coalition that no one wants to leave. Can you share what structures the coalition's created to support state education to employment data systems and have made the coalition and the PSEO efforts more resilient?
Yeah, happy to. And thanks for saying that, Rachel. We do, we are a good group. Everybody wants to come to our party, and that's fun. And we love it. Yeah, I'm actually going to, and I say this with all humility, everyone on this webinar. I'm not saying this because Dana Brandt from Strada asked me this question. I'm saying this because I want to brag about the relationship we have with partners like Strada, Gates Foundation, Lumina Foundation, who sponsored a portion of our event. We really feel very strongly that being part of a larger, we're a coalition, we also are part of a larger network of folks doing some fabulous stuff. So if there's something that makes sense for us to use to frame the work that we do, we grab onto that, and we believe in that. And so I want to give an example to answer your question, Dana, related to Strada's State Opportunity Index, Clear Outcomes Indicators. Strada has put together, and a lot of the folks who are part of the PSEO Coalition were tapped as resources for Strada as they were creating this State Opportunity Index. And the Clear Outcomes Indicators, if you aren't familiar with them, look them up, because they're a fantastic resource to help us think about what are the aspects of state data systems that are important, that make them solid and make them useful for the states that are using them. And so just some examples of some of the things that we've done as the coalition in partnership with Strada, and of course all of our members of the coalition. And I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to miss some of these things. We're working on, while non-credit and non-degree data are not yet in the PSEO tool, we know the importance of those types of learning ways of getting a credential. And so we're in conversation with how do we help folks and help our states think about these non-credit and non-degree pieces, and eventually thinking about how that might flow into and connect with the PSEO data, which is just degree level. So we're working with the State Non-Credit Data Partnership. They've created some communities. They've welcomed us in. And so our members are welcome to participate in the communities when they're talking about how to do these things. JEDX, who's working on a wage enhancement of wage records. These are some of the data that are in the system that are matched with PSEO. And so we are helping our states think about how can they partner with folks within their states thinking about enhancing the wage records so there's more information. We're working with DQC, with West Ed Disc to help our states, and they get some very specific technical assistance to think about developing and enhancing their state longitudinal data systems, which again, the PSEO can be used, as Rachel gave great examples of, in partnership with some of those state data that the states have themselves. And then we have student interns. We have actually awesome student interns who we're working with, who are helping us create visualizations that answer questions specific to our coalition members. So as amazing as the Explorer tool is, sometimes we want to visualize the data in a different way in order to explore the data and answer the research questions that we have. So we have student interns that are helping us do that. And yeah, it's just a great opportunity for us to be working on, again, PSEO as a piece of this whole toolkit and this puzzle that helps us understand our learners and our earners through the cycle, especially in our case from post-secondary into workforce.
Wow, you both have shared a lot of ways that states are using these data and can use these data, but do you see any other opportunities, any low-hanging fruit for states to tap into PSEO data for new research or new data tools? I open it up to both of you.
Yeah, I have one, although I hesitate to call it low-hanging fruit because it's not necessarily simple. So, you got to really be willing to climb the tree on this one. But we're starting to, because again, we've downloaded the data and we're sort of using it in a host of ways. One of them is in an ROI, a return on investment calculation at program level, program and degree level, that we're doing as part of a larger effort on behalf of all three of our institutions. And what's great about that is a lot of the other ROI work that's been done out there, and there has been some really good work, often relies on limited data sets that are more limited than what this one is. So from a wages standpoint, we get more robust data by using the PSEO on this in this work, and I'm excited. I think we're starting to see some really good progress on coming up with the right way to embed this data into that ROI sort of conversation.
Yeah, I'll add, I'm very excited about that. So I got a little distracted because Rachel and I have been talking about how this can fit in with ROI and get the wheels turning, and I'm very excited about that. One of the other things that we're thinking about in terms of kind of untapped potential, and I'm working on a research project with another researcher right now with the PSEO data, and we're going to have the report coming out in June, is we've been thinking so much about just the institutional data. And so the members of our coalition who represent the entities that have the contract with Census and share the data with them, oftentimes are folks like Rachel and her team, and folks like the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, where our chair of our board is from. And so this is fantastic because these folks give us access to, and they're thinking about how our legislators thinking about this, how our states thinking about this, and they can help represent the institutions as well, and the voice of the institutions. And one of the things we're realizing is we as a coalition, as the team, so to speak, the extra resources, the extra hands that our contractors who work with the coalition directly can think about helping our partners and our members, help give them resources that will be useful for them to share with institutions, because at the institution level, these data are just wonderful. Rachel gave the example that there's career services folks who are digging into these data. There might be faculty members who want to look at these data when they're thinking about their program review, their accreditation, if they have specialized accreditors. And so we're thinking of ways that we could kind of, once again, to that first question you asked me, Dana, of what, how can we kind of expand the use of these data and think about helping our members expand the resources that they have, is what can we do as a coalition to help create some materials? And we've got some ideas this summer that we're going to launch, create some materials that help our members, help their institutions use these data and learn what's possible at the institution level, in addition to, of course, the system or the state level as well.
Well, thank you both. I see that there are a lot of questions in the chat, so I don't want to keep people waiting while we keep having this discussion. So as just a first note, do you mind, Gina, reminding folks how they can access some of the data through the census, and then at what level the data are available?
Happy to do that. Yeah, I was looking through the questions, and you all have fantastic questions. We know we just skimmed the surface, and there are, I will say, there are phenomenal resources on the Census's website about the PSEO and PSEO Explorer. Some really nerdy detail level data that some of you may have to sort through. All of your questions are probably answered there, but it may take some digging to answer them. So just kind of, we were 30,000 foot level, so maybe we'll go down to the 10,000 foot right now. The data are definitely publicly available, with a caveat that, of course, these are not individual level data. So you can't look up, Rachel's child going to college and look up what their earnings are. You can't look up my niece, but you can look up, again, they are disaggregated, so to speak, by institution, by degree level, by field of study. And so we actually have, our partners at Census have plans in what they're calling PSEO 2.0, which is hopefully scheduled to come out next year in 2026. We will be able to disaggregate by race, ethnicity, and sex as well, where appropriate, of course, because we can't, the smaller, you all know this, the smaller the N, the more protective you have to be with the data. So you can access it through the Explorer tool and play around with it in there. You can also download the entire data sets. And what we mean by that, again, is by cohort, by these pieces. So these are never individual level data sets. However, there are structures that the federal government has created called the Federal Statistical Research Data Centers, or FSRDCs. They're generally located at a large research university or and some other institutes or safe spaces where folks can apply to use these data, and they can use the individual level data if they are approved for these types of research programs. They're not going to list who the person is. They're all protected data, but you can get individual level data and you can use the data that way. It is a challenging process. You do have to apply. We're thinking about, as the coalition, kind of ways that we might be able to collectively do some of that research as well to learn some things for us. So those are, I think, some of the pieces. I think there was a question in there also about kind of how the partnerships look, and a very astute question that someone asked about. It's not possible, of course, to have every single institution have a contract with the U.S. Census. That would be just massive and not really realistic for the fact that we don't even have 2 full-time census folks working just on this project. So they prefer to have it go through, like Rachel gave her example of the Iowa Board of Regents in Minnesota. It's their SLDS. All of the data flow through and they have an MOU. It is possible to join separately as an institution. They just hope that a system or a state entity or a set of independent colleges that are maybe part of a consortium or something will join in that manner. So that's just the kind of the preferred way of doing it. So I know I didn't cover all of the pieces, but yeah, some of the details. And we are going to have a webinar this summer that covers more of the pieces.
Thank you, Gina. And Rachel, I see that you're already in here answering some questions, but given the work that you've done to pull in some of your partners at the community college and now the ongoing conversations with some of the private institutions, would you mind sharing examples to answer some questions about how folks on listening in could support expansion in their state?
Yes, I mean, I think the biggest thing is awareness, right? Letting people know that this is there and showing them ways to use it, which is something that I've, tried to do a lot of. I've called colleagues of mine in other states and just because maybe, again, sometimes because one of our core peer institutions might be in that state and I know a guy that maybe works in the state agency, so I just call and say, hey, have you guys thought about doing this? And I start showing them some of what we've done to try to sort of bring along a little bit of energy and sort of interest. So that's a lot of it, is just showing the power of it. The other thing that has worked really well for us is being able to demonstrate how we use it in a policy context. That has been a very motivating factor for a lot of folks, because a lot of state legislatures and governor's offices are asking a lot of questions about outcomes, about workforce development issues, about sort of how, about the pipeline for education. And this helps answer some of those questions or inform at least aspects of it. There's also a huge thing around, it's truly partly about the value proposition, right, for higher ed writ large. And so even when it's not maybe about a workforce development issue, sometimes it's about, is college really worth it? And we're able to show that with this. We've been really pleased to be able to show that, even some of the majors that are often maligned as sort of not being sort of maybe preparing for a workforce that you might think about. The philosophy majors get bandied about, others, theater majors, we can show like, hey, yeah, their year 1 earnings aren't great, but by year 5, it's not bad. And by year 10, it's really pretty good. And that has been very powerful for us, both internally and externally, and it helps draw people in.
Thanks, Rachel. Gina, we have a couple questions about organizations who aren't sharing data with the census. Maybe their state doesn't participate yet, or they're an organization, but they're in their state and the state does share, or they're an institution represented by a state that does share. So in all 3 of those instances, are there opportunities for folks from those institutions and entities to participate in the coalition?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. So we kind of to understand our history, I shared a little bit about kind of, Texas nudging census, and then Rachel nudging Texas, and so on and so forth to join this. We now are to the point where we are kind of structured enough, and I joined as director a little over a year ago. So we have kind of, we have the board who sets strategy, and then we have me serving as a contractor, as the director, to help actualize that strategy. And we have some other contractors who are helping us with a lot of this work. Part of what we did in the last year or so is we really created kind of a governance framework. And so a way for us to organize kind of who is officially in this coalition, and how will we engage with folks. And by doing that, we also identified, of course, kind of a larger group of entities, whether it be institutions whose data are in the data set, but aren't the ones who have that contract directly with the census, or whether they be a nonprofit interested in this kind of conversation. And so we have kind of what we call sort of levels of membership. And we are just at the stage, should have done this before this webinar, because that would have been better timing, but we're just at the stage of having a way for folks to kind of sign up to be in the manner of getting communications from us. And so we don't share communications very often. We are on LinkedIn, and folks can always find us on there and see what we're posting. But we aren't regularly sharing communications, except when we have something exciting, like in February, we had our virtual showcase. And this summer, we're prepping to launch a webinar series. And so if you're interested in finding out information about that, this seems very archaic in these days of AI and everything else, but we will share at the end. We'll share my email address. It's just director@pseocoalition.org. But at this point, best way, if you want to get on kind of our mailing list, so to speak, is just to email me there, and then I'll make sure that the folks that can organize that list can get you on there.
Thank you. Rachel, one last question for you. Do you mind talking about how the data is protected? And Gina, if you want to chime in here, obviously welcome, because I know that you work closely with the census partners, but as an institution, when you're thinking about student privacy, how do you ensure that that's protected through this process?
Sure. We do have to submit, the file that we submit is fairly simple, but it does have PII in it. So we do have to be really thoughtful about that issue. The mechanism that the census provides for doing the uploads is highly secure. And so that's not it. And what we've done is each partnering entity with census signs an MOU that outlines the real details around a lot of the privacy issues, a lot of the FERPA protections. So, I mean, part of it is just having your attorney give it very close scrutiny on the front end to make sure you're comfortable, because you may have state laws around privacy that are different than what we have in Iowa even. So that would be my first thing. That said, within the Census Bureau, the folks that do the work on PSEO, Andrew and Cody, who I think Gina had mentioned their names earlier, Andrew and Cody they drive this entire thing. In that sense, they don't even have access to data that would have sort of any privacy concerns with it, because census has such a strong method for managing this sort of thing, and the level of security that I didn't know there were that high a level of security you could put on data, frankly. And Cody and Andrew couldn't even untangle it if they wanted to. And the fact that they're the ones in the weeds with it gives me, I just have I have an awful lot of confidence based on the information they've shared with us over the years.
Thank you. I hope that makes folks who are thinking about joining a little bit more comfortable, knowing how seriously the census partners take this, and that everyone in their states is also thinking about this critically. Then Gina, I have one last question. Someone shared that their state doesn't have a very mature education to employment data system. Do you think this joining PSEO would be a boost to their efforts?
Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, going back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning of just this being, that coalition being just the perfect word for what this entity is. I think having, whatever is going on in your state, having that network of professionals from other states, having that access that we're able to have at kind of a national level with organizations like Data Quality Campaign, WestEd, DISC, and some of these other entities that are really thinking big and also helping folks grassroots get some of this work done. I think, being a part of our conversations and attending our webinars and those kinds of pieces would definitely have the possibility of enhancing things. Whether that would directly change, get you funding for what you need, or those kinds of things, those are always the challenges. But I think one of the things we hear over and over and over from our members is that they value so much hearing what other folks are doing in other places, because that gives them ideas for how they can, knowing they have a different local context, but knowing that they can use those examples. One of our members always jokes about the fact that his commissioner of post-secondary is very competitive. So all he has to do is show an example of how other states are doing this already. And that motivates his commissioner. So whatever it is that kind of motivates your state, you can probably find it within our coalition member states and what they're thinking about doing. Practical ideas, nudges because you're competitive, whatever that looks like, or just seeing that it is possible. If someone else has done it, that maybe your state can do it too.
Well, thank you both. And thank you to everyone who submitted a question. We hope we got to all of yours. It was a really great dialogue to have today. And I'm going to pass it back over to Shytance.
Thank you, Dana. And thank you all for these great questions. I think we answered a bulk of the questions. So thank you all for your engagement and for participating. We weren't able to get to all of the questions today, but we will be sharing our contact information shortly so you can follow up with us directly. Again, thank you for joining us with your engagement, and a huge applause for Dana, Gina, and Rachel for sharing their insights and their perspectives. You all have added both depth, direction, and direction to how to strengthen post-secondary and workforce data alignment. My apologies for not sharing my video. And to our audience, please remember that Education Commission of the States is here to support you in your work, and we trust that you're taking away at least one idea from today's webinar that your state can draw from. If you have questions or requests related to today's session, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Gina Johnson, the director of the PSEO Coalition, and our emails will be shared in the chat as well. And as mentioned, today's recorded session will be shared in your post-event email, so be on the lookout for that. And also, we're happy to share that registration is now open for the next Partnering for Success webinar in our 3-part series with Strada, and this is the last webinar a part of this series. And this session will focus on enhancing wage records to align post-secondary and workforce outcomes. And it will take place on Wednesday, June 4th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. And you can find a registration link in the chat. We hope to see you all there for that webinar. So thank you all again for joining us today, and enjoy your afternoon. Goodbye.